Hey everyone, welcome to Danny Chats. This is episode number 26, and today I'm joined by Brooke, who is a liver transplant recipient like myself. And Brooke also has a podcast and a blog called The Bonus Years, which I've been listening to over the last few days, and I was lucky enough to feature on an episode. So thank you very much, Brooke.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Thank you. So how's your day going?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Glad we got our time differences worked out.
Yeah, we had a bit of a mix-up, didn't we? Because there's a big difference. It's like an 8-hour difference.
Yeah, you're 8 hours ahead of me. Same
Yeah.
day.
And whereabouts in America are you then?
So I'm in Washington State. I'm in Olympia, which is the state capital.
Olympia, nice. Yeah. Because listening to your podcast, I've got quite a few questions that I wanted to ask around sort of states and, where you go for your transplants and things like that. But do you want to go back to how it all started for you, the transplant journey?
Sure. So I had a pretty much healthy upbringing, like no medical issues. Pretty different from your story, where you had kind of some ongoing symptoms growing up. And then when I turned 20, I got sick really suddenly. And we didn't really know what was wrong. I was fatigued, kind of nauseous, but I just finished like my exams for college. And that's kind of a pretty normal response for a college kid, is to
Yeah.
just be real tired after all the studying. And so I didn't think anything of it. And my mom was like, "You just don't look like yourself. You don't like, why don't we just go get checked out at the doctor?" So we did that. And I got an autoimmune hepatitis diagnosis. And within 6 weeks of that diagnosis, I was in complete liver failure.
Wow. Wow, that's quick.
So
So with
long.
the autoimmune hepatitis, is that something that they give you medication for? Were they monitoring you? What did they say when they diagnosed you with that? Like literally just you've got that, off you go.
It kind of felt like that to me. So they said, a healthy liver regenerates itself. I knew nothing about the liver, how it worked. I maybe should have paid more attention in anatomy. Um, but it was like, okay, so where's my liver in my body? What does it do? Okay. So they said, with rest and, maybe some popsicles and hydration, you should be fine. We'll check in on you, measure your labs, see if you're okay. And that was the plan. Like the game plan was, let's see if your liver does what it should do and heals itself.
Yeah. Because at the time you was really into your singing as well, wasn't you? So you was, as well as all your studies, you were sort of very busy singing.
Yeah. So my major in college was vocal performance. So
Yeah.
my studying was singing, my hobbies were singing, my work was singing. And that was really all that was on my mind, was like, how soon can I get back to singing? And I didn't feel great, but I didn't feel bad enough to be told to like rest for a few weeks. I'm pretty hard-headed,
Yeah.
strong-willed. So I was like, okay, let's make this happen. Let's get me back. Let's get me back to doing what I love to do.
Yeah. The thing is with feeling ill is we have no gauge, do we? We have no gauge to say, this is what, quote, I don't like the word normal, but this is what a normal person feels like. This is what I feel like, because you just think what you feel like is normal, sort of thing,
Right.
really.
Yeah,
Um, you get used to it and you're like, well, this is how everyone feels, but it's clearly not.
clearly not.
Yeah. So that very short period of time, you ended up with liver failure and then straight into ICU.
Yeah, straight into ICU. So
And you, how
I
old? You're
had
20 at this time.
I was 20,
Mm.
and you know, I thought I was doing better. I left my home and went back to school for singing, got sick and went into the emergency room, and they put me straight into ICU and said, "Hey, like you're not doing well. Let's wait for your parents to get here to talk about it." My parents were 6 hours driving away. So I was kind of frustrated at the process because I felt like I was old enough to have like a doctor talk to me as an adult, but they
Yeah.
wanted to wait for my parents. And my liver just quit. It just wasn't working well. And so they were talking about the possible need for a transplant. I just didn't feel like I wanted one. Now I know that's not like a logical, not a logical answer, but I don't know if you remember how you felt when you were 20, but I felt
Yeah.
pretty invincible. Like,
Yeah. I
I'm not gonna
mean,
die. I'm fine.
Yeah, I totally can relate. I mean, when I was diagnosed when I was 14, and that was one of the options they gave me was, they said we would really like to give you a liver transplant, but luckily for me, I said, I refused, and I said, can I, or not refused, but I said, can I try the medication option?
Yeah.
So I think for anyone young, or for anyone at any age, you don't want to have the operation unless you have to.
Right. And so I just really didn't think it was necessary. And I don't think that was maybe the most logical thing, but that's what I wanted. And
Uh,
so we still were looking at transplant centers and trying to figure out what the next thing would be to help me get healthy.
Yeah, because that interested me is you looking at transplant centers because here, from the way I understand it and the way it happened for me is like my doctors referred me to the hospital, my local hospital then referred me to a specialist. Whereas for you guys, by the sounds of it, you can kind of pick and choose where you go for your transplants.
Yeah, you kind of can.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in Mississippi and I was in college in Tennessee. And so my family was trying to decide, did I want to have a transplant somewhere closer to my home or somewhere closer to college? I was kind of advocating for like, let's have the transplant center closer to my college. And my family, they won the argument and ended up with the transplant center in New Orleans, which is just
Yeah.
one state away, because they wanted me to have a support system,
Yeah.
and most of
I
my
was
family was there.
I was kind of giggling to myself a bit about that because, going through the transplant myself, now I know what a big ordeal it is. But at the time, you would be like, I want to be near all my college friends. I'll be fine. I'll just have the operation and I'll be back to my feet. But in reality,
Absolutely.
it's definitely not like that, is it?
No, it's definitely not. And I'm glad that my parents knew better than me,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
definitely. So, how does the process work? Because do you have to write a letter to the hospital? How do you contact them saying, look, I need a liver transplant. Can I have it with you guys? Because surely some of them might be too busy.
It's true. Well, the way our health insurance works here, like we got a referral from the doctor I was currently seeing.
Mhm.
Um, and once we decided, like, hey, this is closest to home, here are all the reasons she should go to this center. And they made sure that they had room to admit me, all those sorts of things. So I didn't have to do the legwork on that. The doctors did it for me, which was great.
Yeah, that is very good. And then you went off to the hospital, and you kind of said in your story, like I don't want to repeat everything because obviously it'd be nice for people to go and listen. But you said you were still kind of in denial about, even though you were at the transplant hospital, about actually having a transplant. You thought they were just going to fix you up.
Yeah, I mean, I remembering that I didn't know anything about the liver, and then they taught me, hey, the liver regenerates itself. In my mind, I was having a hard time reconciling the idea that my liver could regenerate and yet I needed a transplant. That didn't make sense to me. So I was like, okay, maybe they'll just fix me up and I'll be on my way. So when I got admitted, they started like the high dose steroids to try to get my liver to kind of give a reboot, basically, kind of like a computer. And my liver just was so far gone so quickly, that when they did the liver biopsy, they said, hey, the cell structure inside your liver has collapsed so much it can't regenerate. It can't do that properly.
Did they say what was causing it?
Um, we still don't know.
No.
So that's kind of one of the weird things. Most people know kind of what disease or what incident caused their liver to fail, because they couldn't do research within my liver because the cells were so damaged. They can't determine what caused it. Um, I didn't drink or smoke or do drugs, and I wasn't taking any like prescriptions I shouldn't take. I'd taken antibiotics for a cold. I'd taken some like herbal medications to help kind of strengthen my voice, figure out those kind of things, but we could never pinpoint what caused it. So
What
that's
were the herbal remedies, just out of interest, if you can remember?
well, like echinacea. So that's a pretty common, like, if you get a cold, you can take echinacea
Yeah.
and it helps you get better faster. And in the United States, they have like the Federal Drug Administration that like approves medication. And then
Yeah.
there's like the herbal realm, and they're not FDA approved. And so they tell you like, these are not FDA approved. Take them at your own risk. But it's pretty common to do that. So I
Yeah.
didn't feel like I was putting myself at risk by taking a supplement.
Yeah, like you say, I mean, if it's fairly common, then it could have been anything. It's amazing. And then I suppose they took your, like you say, they took your liver away for testing, but they just couldn't find anything.
Yeah,
I,
because they would need the cells to be able to to research. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so
yeah,
the best
yeah.
of my understanding, once the structure of the cell had collapsed, they couldn't verify what caused
Yeah, and I suppose to
failure.
them at the time when you're that ill, it's not really important what's causing it. It's about fixing you, like, getting that old liver out and the new one in.
Yeah, I mean, I had lots of questions because I'm curious, but their priority was how can we make you healthy as fast as possible.
Yeah. So how long were you in the transplant hospital for? So you've gone to A&E, or A&E, then they've taken you to ICU, then your parents have got there and they've said, like, now's the time for your transplant. So then what's happened?
So um, they actually moved me out of ICU to like a transplant prep kind of floor because they said I was too active to be in ICU. I
Yeah.
was still up, walking around, I wouldn't say lots of energy, but compared to your typical ICU patient,
Yeah.
I mean, normally you're not up and walking around in ICU.
Yeah.
So I went to the transplant floor. They did like the high dose steroids, they did some other things. And when they determined that didn't work, the team of doctors came in and talked to me and said, "We think transplant's your best option. Um, Here, we'll do some workup, like testing, figure out what priority level you are, and then get you on the transplant list." So I know that's a
Yeah.
little different too from how it goes across the ocean for you guys.
Yeah, because you have like the MELD score, don't you?
Yeah.
But all the way through my process, I don't remember him mentioning anything about, where I am on the scale of, you know, of transplant patients. It was just, you need a transplant. There is a list, which obviously you have to wait for these people to get through, but they didn't really mention anything about, a MELD score or anything like that. How does that
Yeah. And
work?
well, I don't take my word for anything because I'm not a pro. But they kind of measure your, how long you would live without the transplant, what your support system's like, how your mental health is. Like, so there's like the physical health and then the support system factors, and like how critical you are.
Yeah.
And so I don't remember my number, but I remember being told I was the priority for liver in the 6 surrounding states.
Yeah. Would that also matter then, depending on where you went? Would you have more likeliness to have an organ at this one rather than that one? Does that happen?
Yeah, and if you ask different people, you'll probably get different opinions.
Yeah.
But there are stories of people going to a different transplant center after waiting on a list at one for a long time,
Yeah.
and then getting a transplant a lot quicker. So, I mean,
Can
because how hard it is to transport organs post procurement from the donor, you have to be in somewhat proximity to the donor.
yeah,
So
yeah,
if you travel to a different location, your odds definitely change.
yeah, yeah. Can you be registered at more than one, do you know?
I don't think you can.
No. This is
No.
just improve your odds.
Yeah, I
Spread
mean,
them
it would
out.
would be nice. It
Yeah.
doesn't work that way.
So how long between getting told you need the transplant to having the transplant did it happen? Because you got flown out of the hospital you were in as well, didn't you?
Yeah, so I went into the hospital in Tennessee where I was in school, and they flew me to Louisiana, where I ended up having my transplant. Once I got on the list, so we're coming up on my 16th liver birthday in June.
That's
And
good.
so, yeah, so I got listed on June 21st, 2005. And on June 24th, I got transplanted. So I was on the list for 3 days.
Days. Yeah, that's incredible. And can you just explain to everyone what it's like in the aeroplane out of interest?
It's
What's it like inside? Is it just full of medical stuff? Is it quite plush? Is it
it
basic?
no, I don't know that it was plush. That's not what I would think. I've never flown laying down, so I've never like been on a continental flight where I had like first class where you could
Yeah,
sleep and lay down. Like I don't know what that's like, but I had to lay down on a stretcher And I was hooked up to IVs, and it was very crowded. So it's really just enough room for like the pilot, maybe I'm assuming there was a co-pilot, but I don't remember. And then one of my parents flew with me, and then like a couple of nurses. So we're just very squished together. I was laying next to one set of windows, and then there's like one seat on the other side, like a row of seats. So it kind of looks like an ambulance, but up in the air.
Yeah. Was it those guys that you asked, or not those, the ones flying, but who was it you asked for the McDonald's?
That was the guys that drove me to the airport.
Yeah, because I have a very similar story, because when I was being transferred from my local hospital to the main one, I said, can I stop at a McDonald's? And they took me for a drive-through.
They're so much nicer to you.
Yeah, they were really nice. We weren't in a rush, so it was lucky. I think they felt, because I was a child, they felt a bit of sympathy.
How old were you when that happened?
14.
Oh yeah. I was 20. I felt like a child.
Yeah,
because I was, I was frustrated about food more than anything else. Like, I really enjoy food. I know you do too.
Yeah.
And so when they started taking away my food options, I got really upset with them. So I knew it was going to be a long day of flying. I knew we were going to be traveling, and I was like, if I don't get McDonald's now, they're not going to give me McDonald's once I get there.
Yeah.
And the guys were like, no, we can't do it. It's against policy.
Screw policy.
Yeah. Screw policy.
I need my McDonald's.
I'm dying. Give me McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you should have pulled out. You should have pulled out the I'm dying card.
I think I did. I still don't think they cared.
My last McDonald's. Yeah, I can relate
that you got McDonald's.
Yeah, and I was really giggling when you said it, because that was all. That's to be honest, the whole time I was in hospital, the whole thing on my mind was food, and trying to get out of hospital as soon as possible to get some decent food again.
Yeah, how's hospital food over there?
Terrible. I'm presuming it's the same over in America. I can understand how and why. It's not like years ago where they had someone cook it all up on site. Now it's all just prepped food that comes in, gets put in microwaves, and shipped out to all the wards. But
ours still have food cooked in house.
What do they really?
Yeah.
So you've got no excuse for it being bad.
Well, I mean, they cook a lot of food at one time. So
yeah. No, that's good to know that it's cooked in house. I mean, I think part of recovery is diet, the food you eat, so it does surprise me a bit, how sometimes the hospital food is that bad, because there'd be times where I just wouldn't really eat because it was bad, so that's not good for your recovery, is it?
No, it's really not.
And you were saying that you had like a little ritual of having was it a midnight snack?
Yeah, my midnight snack, graham crackers, and because they have like on the patient floors, they have kind of a fridge, like a snack fridge, where the nurses can go get you like some juice or some crackers if you're nauseous or whatever. Well, when I found out they had ice cream, I was like, oh, this is it. I'm having ice cream every day. So I always got graham crackers, and I would dip them in ice cream and eat that for my midnight snack.
That sounds good.
Steroids make you hungry.
Yeah, steroids just mess you up all round.
Really hungry. It's true.
Yeah, all round. True. So you were in ICU for 3 days, or you got flown back in ICU for 3 days, and then you had your transplant. So I take it there were no like false calls for you, because you was already in hospital. There was no.
It wasn't like your story where you got, some calls while you're in the bathtub.
Yeah.
So the lead surgeon came to my room the first day, and he said, "We found you a liver, but it wasn't the right one." And I was like pretty angry, because I mean, when you tell me like I'm gonna die within the week, it's important that you get transplanted, and then they say, "Well, we found a match, but it wasn't good enough." I'm like, well, I'm dying. How do you decide what's good enough, right? Yeah. And so his comparison, I don't know what stores you have over there, but we have TJ Maxx. Do you guys have TJ Maxx?
TK Maxx, ours is called.
Oh, cool.
It probably is the same place though.
I'm gonna have to look it up now. So he told me it was like the liver he considered it a TJ Maxx liver, and he wanted me to have a Macy's liver.
Yeah.
It's like a really nice department store. Yeah. So I was like, that's great, but I really want to like not die.
Yeah, sometimes you can't afford the Macy's and you have
Yeah,
to go with
sometimes
him.
all you got's TJ Maxx.
Yeah, yeah.
So he passed on the first liver, and then the second liver came 2 days later. But they didn't tell me in the moment. They told me after the fact.
How do you mean?
Like they told me, hey, we found a liver, but it wasn't good enough. They weren't like prepping me for surgery or
Oh,
anything
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
only got
yeah,
prepped one time.
yeah. Yeah, that must be frustrating when they say that because for me, I was kind of stable and all right. I wasn't in hospital, so if I did get a false call, it wasn't too bad. Or my false calls were, okay, I'm going home and I'm going to eat. Like that's all. Just get me home so I can go and eat because I hadn't,
Yeah.
you can't eat for however long before. So did they go through all that with you? Because obviously you're in hospital, you're eating, and then they turn up and they'll be like, right now you can't eat for 12 hours because we're gonna do this.
Yeah. So my nurse that usually brought in my midnight snack came back to me one night without my snack. And I was like, where's my snack? And she smiled like kind of a weird smile. And I was like, no, really, where's my snack? And she was like, you don't get a snack tonight. And I was like, I'm not happy with this. And she goes,
Yeah.
it's because we found you a match. And I was like, oh, but why can't I have a snack? Like I didn't understand that I had to be fasting and all of those things. So the night I didn't get my midnight snack was like, okay, we got to start fasting. We got to start surgery prep, like making sure you have all the catheters and the IV lines and all the things.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff I remember kind of got put in when I was sedated. So I walked into the surgery room and then I came out, completely hooked up from top to bottom.
That's crazy. And I think it's probably different because I was already in hospital.
Yeah.
So they gave me some like medication to relax me, and did some of my IV lines then, but they did a lot of it while I was already sedated. So
Yeah. So they did the operation and you came around fine, which is great. How long were you in hospital for after?
uh, we've been arguing about the timeline, my family and I, because we can't quite remember. So I remember coming out of sedation and still having the breathing tube in my throat.
Yeah.
And like how scary that was. And then I know they wanted me to get up and walk the next day. And I was like, I don't want to get up and walk. I want to lay here. And they were like, that's how you get better. And I'm like, no, I want to take a nap. So it was somewhat like maybe because we're arguing about the timeline, I'm trying to think of what it was. A couple of weeks, I
Yeah.
think. And
Yeah.
then there's a hotel that's connected to the transplant center. And we stayed there for at least a month.
Yeah.
Which
One thing.
that was pretty. Oh, did
Sorry,
you hear me?
say that again.
Oh, I just said it was pretty cool to be able to stay at a hotel instead of in the hospital, but to
Yeah.
still be close to go over for daily labs and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's really nice because, just being away from the hospital, it helps in itself, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Really.
And one thing I found really interesting or was a clever idea was what your mum was doing with your mobile phone. So do you want to explain what
Sure.
was happening?
So because it was 2005, that was right at the very beginning of Facebook.
Yeah.
So I believe at the beginning you had to have like a .edu email address.
Yeah.
And it was like invitation only at certain colleges first. So we couldn't communicate through Facebook. There was no Caring Bridge. There was no GoFundMe, all the kind of things you would normally use to communicate, social media. Like it wasn't there yet. And so my mom would take my cell phone every day and change the voicemail message. So when people called, it would say, this is the Brooke update for, and then she would list the date and tell them the update. So it kept us from having to tell the same information over and over. But people could still call and check on me, which was really helpful because we had a lot of people who cared and wanted to
Yeah.
know. But we just, as you know, like it's hard to have the energy and the emotional bandwidth to retell the same information over and over.
Yeah, I didn't have to deal with any of it. I'm a very closed person when it comes to this stuff anyway, generally. And I don't tell anyone. So my sister was the one that had to deal with it all. And I was reading her blog post that she wrote for me recently, and she said it was frustrating for her having to relay, to however many family members and everyone. I don't know, like you say, 3 times I went, 4 times I went. So she'd be like, "He's going, he's not going," and then everyone would have hundreds of questions.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, my mom's pretty clever.
Yeah. And you were saying as well, like you got to a point where you were having guests, but you just needed your own space in the end and some time to recover.
Yeah, I would have probably told you I was an extrovert going into like all of the transplant season of my life.
Yeah.
And now I definitely am aware that I'm more of an introvert. And I don't know if that changed because of surgery or just as I've gotten older, because there were a lot of really caring people that wanted to see me, but it takes so much energy to recover.
Yeah.
And then like the mental health aspect of post-transplant, like you just really don't know what you're getting into.
No.
And so just having to explain things to people and they all ask you the same questions, like, how are you doing? What can we do for you? How can we help? I'm like, I don't have the energy to figure that out.
Yeah.
And
Just leave
so
me alone.
yeah, you could let me rest. And so I used to think it was rude to decline guests.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we just finally said, only close friends and family. You got to call ahead and make sure Brooke's good with visitors and, don't just like drive here and assume she's going to see you because you drove here. Like that's not going to work.
Yeah, I was very much the same, and my family would only come pop in for a little while, and yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm like, none of my friends really came to the hospital, and I was only in for I think 5 days after my transplant, maybe a little bit longer, 5, 7 days. But yeah, I didn't have any friends; it was just family, and I was pleased with that. There's no way I got out, and I sort of thought, oh, none of my friends come to saw me because I wouldn't want them to anyway. I mean, who
Yeah.
wants to really sit in a hospital?
I mean, we don't even want to sit in the
No,
hospital.
exactly. So dragging other people there, and especially when you're going to be out soon, so
Yeah.
it's
I
just
think some of
focus.
my favorite visitors were the ones who didn't talk about my transplant at all. They just
Yeah,
came in and told me what was going on in their life or made me laugh, or they were like, "Oh, you've got to watch this video or this episode of something," and
yeah,
would bring me something to watch or do, like,
yeah,
because I needed a distraction.
yeah,
I was living in like crisis trauma mode and I needed somebody to help me get out of that. A
yeah.
couple of my friends got me a tiara and a sash and wrote me a card. I still have it and it said, "We know you love attention, but you could have gotten it a better way."
That's lovely.
Like you need people who can make jokes of like really hard things in your life, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'd say my two closest best friends, they haven't asked me one single question. It's been like I haven't even had a transplant almost. Like I just come back out and life's been back to normal. And if I have something to say, they'll listen, but they've never asked any questions. I think they like you say, they've kind of seen it as just, just get on with things. Like I've probably been asked a million questions. So.
Yeah. Do you feel like with your friends like that you feel open to talk about things because they haven't brought it up? Or do you feel
Yeah.
like maybe they don't want to know?
No, no. I mean, there has been times when I've said stuff and they listen and then they'll have questions, but yeah, they've never really once sort of come and asked me out of the blue or just brought it up, like so. Yeah, maybe they just were nervous to ask questions. I never thought of it like that, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Different personalities. That's why I was asking, because that's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I think to them it's just like. One of my friends has been friends with me since I was young, and he used to come and see me in the hospital when I was 14, 15. So he's been around it his whole life. Anyway, he's like a brother to me. So I think to him it's just normal for me to be in and out of hospital. So it's just
Yeah.
another day. Like, yeah.
Yeah. That's
But
good that you've got people that you have been around long enough to kind of know
yeah,
what's gone on.
yeah. He did say to me the other day. He said, I am amazed at all the stuff you're doing." Like, because
Mm.
I think when you hear someone's having a transplant, you don't know what's going to be their life afterwards, do you?
Yeah.
I think, we don't know what our life's going to be afterwards, or we have all that worry.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had your transplant and you were in hospital for a few weeks and then you came out. Did you go back home?
Yeah. So after the hotel, I went back home and I took a semester off from college to recover. And because I was a voice major, like, and then they cut through all your abdominal muscles, like I had to rebuild that muscle support before I could even go back to school. So
did they give
go
you the
ahead.
Mercedes cut, or is it just an L?
I have this one. It looks like a mountain.
Oh, really? Well, that's different to what everyone that I've seen then.
I've never seen anyone with mine. I think it's called a chevron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's just surgeon's preference, isn't it, to how they do their slicing.
Yeah. My belly button was crooked after they sewed me back up.
Oh, wow.
And I told
Everyone's
them,
a bit different.
I was like, "Are you going to fix this?" And they were like, "We saved your life. Congratulations."
Yeah.
Like, quit whining about it. Oh, well.
Yeah. Off you go. We've got others to do now.
Yeah. We're not plastic surgeons. We're not fixing that.
So in your mind, was you wanting to get back to singing straight away? Was you sort of not thinking about that anymore? Was you, because your whole process leading up to it, all you could think about was singing and everything. After your transplant, you must have sort of then thought, shit, this is serious. I've got some real recovery to do on myself.
Yeah, I think I was somewhat in denial still of how hard recovery would be,
Yeah.
just like on my body, because I wanted to go back to school right away. And then I realized, oh, I'm so not ready to do that. Like, I don't have the stamina. I need the support from my family. But singing was still number one, like main goal. And well, I'm trying to explain it in an easy way. I felt like I had something to prove. I think that's probably the best way to say it. Like, I had to prove to everybody, like, oh, I can get sick and have a transplant and still come out and be really successful.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of years after my transplant, like, feeling like I had to be this like role model for people. Like, you can go through something super hard and still come out on the other side and be successful. Not realizing that it's really just successful to be alive and to enjoy your life on the other side.
Yeah.
And so I put all this extra pressure on myself to be like doing hard things that maybe I should have given myself more time to heal or recover or taken better care of my mental health or my body. But I just went straight back into like, let's work hard. Let's do this. Nothing happened. Everything is fine.
Yeah. I think what you just said there is probably one of the best things anyone said on my podcast about that, the successful, you're successful in the fact that you've gone through this process and you're living. Like,
Yeah,
that's amazing. And
it really is.
I think because we go through it, we don't maybe give ourselves enough credit for the struggle that it is. We kind of do just think, well, I've got to be tough and I've got to get on with it. And yeah, I think people do. Anyone that's been through any kind of transplant or any major surgery, it can affect you in a lot of ways.
Definitely can. And I think the days that are hard, like where I don't, when I think about I might need a plant down the road, like I don't want to think about the potential of that. But because I have an autoimmune disorder and we don't know how long this liver will last, like that's a reality.
Yeah.
Like, oh, living is enough. I have a wonderful husband. I have awesome kids. Like I'm taken care of. I'm healthy-ish most of the time. And so like I don't have to accomplish anything else. And if I could just learn one thing, like I'm pretty hard on myself, but if I could just learn one thing, it would just to be able to accept like you're doing okay without having to do anything.
Yeah.
Just enjoy being.
Just enjoy being. Yeah. Very wise words. Very wise words. So then after all of this, you kind of got back to, life, you have children, and things are going swimmingly, or, as swimmingly as possible.
Yeah, I would say probably the challenges I face because are mostly because I have a weak immune system, which is what's, medication related. So a year after my transplant, I got West Nile virus, which came over to the US from Egypt. And it affected I lost my speech and my vision and I couldn't walk.
Oh, wow. That must have been very scary.
It was really scary. And I just thought I had a migraine at first. I had a really bad headache, and that was my first symptom.
How far along down the line was that after your transplant?
A year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I ended up going back to hospital in Louisiana because they just always took care of me. Like the transplant center always took care of me. And then a year after that, I got the swine flu. And so those first 3 years, I just had like kind of hit after hit.
Yeah, tough, very tough. Was
Yeah.
you on a high dose of anti-rejection tablets all through this time?
Yes, and I still am. I'm still
Yeah.
in a pretty high dose.
What dose are
The
you
doc
on?
So I take Tacro, which I'm on 4 milligrams twice a day.
Yeah.
I'm on Sirolimus, which I'm on 2 milligrams once a day.
Yeah.
And I'm still on 10 milligrams of prednisone
Yeah.
every day. And the doctors keep telling me it's because my immune system by itself is just so active. Like I have a
Yeah.
really healthy immune system, which is great for anyone except a transplant patient.
Yeah, someone that doesn't need a healthy immune system.
Yeah. So it just puts me at a higher risk
Yeah.
in general. And we chose to adopt our kids instead of putting me at risk having
Yeah.
kids biologically. And that's been a great experience. Not an easy experience, but a great experience.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I said this to someone else in one of my podcasts that sort of growing up, weirdly, that was the option that I'd kind of considered most. Not, I don't really know. Genetically, you can pass on Wilson's disease, but it wasn't because of that. That wasn't in my head. I don't really know what my thought was, but I just thought, adoption would be an option for me. Yeah, yeah,
that'd be
but
awesome.
yeah. It's
You'll be an awesome dad.
one day maybe. One day. I'm still struggling to look after myself at the moment.
Well,
So
that doesn't get any easier.
no, no. Maybe they'll look after me. Maybe that's what I need.
That's why you have them, so that one day when you're old, they can look after you.
They can look after you. Yeah. How old are your two?
My two are 7 and 4.
Oh, lovely. And boys or girls?
My daughter's 7 and my son is 4.
A boy and a girl. Yeah. Nice, nice.
Yeah,
I bet
they're pretty cool.
yeah. Do they ask? Have they seen your scar? Have they said anything about it?
Yeah, they kind of like with adoption, we decided anything difficult with our kids, we were just going to start talking to them about it from when
Yeah.
they were born. So we started talking to them about their adoption before they could really understand or ask questions.
Yeah.
And same with my health. So, oh, I had a liver transplant, and I just would narrate for them like, oh, I've got to take my medicines. This is what keeps me healthy. And
Yeah.
so my biggest side effects regularly are just like a lot of fatigue and migraine.
Yeah.
And so the kids, they're aware that it's because of my liver. They don't understand that yet,
Yeah. Kids are
like
kids.
scientifically. And my daughter's very scientific minded, and hopefully she'll do some cool, like, I don't know. I'm like, you could be a doctor. She's like, I want to be an astronaut. So,
That's
um,
cool.
so they know that I'm, always dealing with illness, and that it they've started to be able to verbalize when it frustrates them that I can't do things.
Yeah.
So like, that was reality for me. To Mom, why can't you play with us today? You always have a migraine, or you're always tired. And I know that they're generalizing because they're kids, and kids are just they're dramatic, and that's their feelings.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to invalidate their feelings and say I'm not always tired. I'm tired a lot, but I'm not always tired. But it allows me to help them understand what it's like to have empathy for people.
I was just going to say that. I mean, growing up, it's good for them in a way because they will understand how other people have these struggles, and sometimes it's not always visible that people have these struggles, and everyone is different.
Yeah. So for the most part, they're pretty incredible, and they'll, oh, you've got a headache. Let me turn off the light.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lady in front of me in the supermarket the other day. She had twin daughters and another daughter, and you could tell it had been a long day, and the kids were just touching absolutely everything, moving everything, and she was just like, and then one of the kids, she kept on telling them not to do stuff, and then one of the kids went to this like photo booth and tried to get in it, and the mum was like, get away from the photo booth, and the kid turned around and went, you don't let us do anything. I was just laughing. Oh, you've got
Yes.
such a tough life.
Yep. And they're always the most dramatic when they're out in public.
Yeah.
So at home, they're great. My son ran away from me at school yesterday. And I was like, oh man, that looks like we always worry about what it makes us look like as parents. And he's just like, I don't want to go to school. I'm just going to run around.
I'm gonna run
So
around. I remember a story of Tommy Lee Jones, the singer and everything. He was
Yeah.
taking his children to the cinema for one of their birthdays, and the kid said, "Dad, you can't sit with us. You're embarrassing." And he was like, "Do you know who I am? I'm Tommy Lee Jones. Like, you know, I'm a rock star." And the kids are just like, "Dad, you're just an embarrassment. That's all you
Oh
are."
yeah. They don't
Yeah.
care how accomplished you are or how proud
No,
of yourself you are. No.
kids will tell you, and your own kids will definitely tell you how it is.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, my daughter was in kindergarten. She would be like, "Mom, are you taking me to school like that?" I'd be like what? And she'd be like, "Are you gonna wear makeup today?" Like, no, I wasn't planning on wearing makeup today. Maybe you could put some mascara
Yeah.
on. I'm like,
Go,
come on, kids.
go and fix yourself up a bit, Mum. That's
Yeah.
funny. That's brilliant. So, do you want to say a bit, because you've been doing, how long have you been doing your podcasts and things, the bonus years? And I'll put a link up to that because it's very good.
Yeah. So, thank you. It's really kind. The bonus years we started last year at the beginning of the pandemic. Um, I lost my job kind of right at the beginning of that, and was like, "What am I really passionate about doing?" And I love talking to people, and I love helping people.
Yeah.
And so I thought, what better way to do that than kind of blogging? And then my husband, he was like, "I don't like to read." He was like, "I want to support you, but like, I'm never going to be the person who sits down and reads a blog every week.
Yeah.
But if you did a podcast, I would totally listen to that." So he kind of inspired this idea that we would do the podcast and reach a different audience than we do with the blog. And so we podcast together, and we've been telling my transplant story in different parts, which has been really fun.
I really like the dynamic because, you know, you two go way back. So it's kind of nice to hear his little sides of it as well as someone that was close to it. And because we don't obviously often sort of think about that.
Yeah.
So it's
Well, and
nice.
I had broken up with him just before my transplant.
Yeah.
So he's been around, but you know, we broke up for a long time, 6 years before we got back together, and now we've been married for 11.
That's
So
great.
and he's funnier than me. Like, I'm aware that I'm not that funny of a person. I tend to be more of the like, tell me how you're feeling and let's talk about feelings and like all the emotional stuff. And so he brings kind of a lightness to the podcast that I need, because
Yeah.
otherwise people would just either not listen or they would just sit there and cry the whole time.
Yeah, no, it's a very nice dynamic between the two of you. It is very
Thank
good.
you.
And like I say, it keeps it interesting.
Yeah, so it's really it's kind of a fun hobby, and we're recording a new episode tonight that I'm pretty excited about. We're going to talk about transplant patients and COVID,
Yeah.
and how the pandemic's affected us, and want to kind of help people understand what it's like to be immune compromised in a pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been very, very interesting to say the least, the pandemic.
I
It's
would
been
agree.
tough. I think it's been tough mentally, for me anyway. I mean, I can admit that. It's been very hard at times. Coming so close, I was shortly after my transplant as well. So to go
Yeah.
through all of that and then to be hit with this, and I suppose it's the same with any, because no matter how long ago you had your transplant, I think it's always quite fresh in your memory.
Mhm.
So to have this come along and you're like, I've dealt with so much. Like, why are you doing this now?
Yeah.
So yeah, but then there was the other side to it where I saw a transplant patient say that they feel a lot safer at the moment in terms of they were at a restaurant and they said our table was miles away from everyone else's. They were like, I wish it was always like this, you know?
Yeah. I kind of feel that too, as things here seem to be easing up on restrictions. I found myself being more anxious going back out into the world and having to navigate, what do I do? Because for a
Yeah,
year I felt really safe and really protected. And now it's like, oh, are they wearing a mask? Are they not wearing a mask because they're vaccinated or because they're tired of wearing a mask,
yeah,
or different things like that.
yeah, yeah. But hopefully it's not going to be long until it's a distant memory and we all sort of just look back in a few years' time and be like, wow, that was a crazy period.
Yeah, I can't wait. I told my kids, I said, you're going to explain this to your kids one day, and
Yeah.
their minds are not going to be able to wrap around like what you're talking about. It's a historical moment.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my friends, she's got a daughter, and she was upset her daughter had to have a birthday during the lockdown, and she got on the garden shed, and all the neighbours come out, and they all sung happy birthday. And I said to her, I said like, it's tough, yeah, it's tough, and your kid didn't get to spend it with their friends, but when they grow up, they'll look back at this and they'll be like, oh, I remember that birthday I had out in the garden. People come out and sung happy birthday to me, and it'll be
That's so
just as
cool.
memorable. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely are going to have lots of stories to tell about how we survived and, what we learned. I think a lot of us have learned we don't need as much stuff as we thought we needed, and what
Yeah.
relationships matter to us, and
Yeah.
how we all affect each other as humanity. I think that's just a tremendous thing that we've been aware of.
Yeah, and I've seen a hell of a lot more people connect with nature, being back outside.
Yeah.
And pictures, loads of people putting just pictures up and being like, it's so nice. It's like, yes, it is nice outside. Get out there more.
Yes. Yeah, your pictures always make me want to come visit because it's so beautiful there.
Oh, it's rainy all the time, especially at the moment. This last few weeks, it's just been non-stop rain.
It rains here all the time too. So.
Yeah, yeah. But the thing is, we get forecast sun and then it just rains. It's just English typical weather.
Well, one day we're going to come visit.
Yeah, well, when you come over, we'll meet up. I'd love to say hi. Definitely.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
We would love
and
that.
if I ever come over to America, I'll come and say hello.
Definitely. Please do.
Well, thank you very much, Brooke. I've just noticed that I've kept you here for nearly an hour.
No worries at all. Glad to chat with you.
It's gone so quick.
I know. It's always fun to talk to you, Danny.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks again for having me on your podcast. And we'll sort something out in the future, definitely.
Yes, we will.
Well, thank you very much. Stay safe.
You're welcome. All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye-bye.